Hello friends of YouTube, welcome back to Mike Reads the World. Today we're going to rural Botswana with When Rain Clouds Gather by Bessie Head. This book was published first in 1972. Bessie Head lived from 1937 to 1986. She wrote a couple other books, I believe, and it says on the back here that this book was inspired by her own life experiences as an outcast in apartheid South African society, and then as a refuge living in a development association farm in Botswana. And I can definitely see that. However, her main character, or the character we begin the book as, is actually a man named Mac, we'll call him. His full name is Makaya, but, this Englishman that he meets in the village of Golema, Mmidi, where he flees to as a refugee, calls him Mac. So we're going to call him Mac. And so yeah, this village, Golema, Mmidi, he's come here. He's fled South Africa to go to Botswana because he just got out of prison. Why was he in prison? He was a part of a kind of radical political group against the government, and then was found with some documents on him he shouldn't have had, was thrown into prison, and now he's out of prison and fleeing to Botswana. So he first meets Dinoragua, I think is his name, who's kind of this kind of the old wise man type of character, and he's the one who brings him and adopts Mac as a kind of an adopted son, brings him back to his village with the idea that maybe he could marry his daughter. However, his daughter, Marie or Maria, I can't remember, is actually seems to be forming a bond with this Englishman that's working in the village named Gilbert. Gilbert is a really fascinating character. My first thought is, well, is this going to be your kind of typical story of, colonial guy, English guy, bad guy, and whatever? But no, Gilbert's a really interesting character. He's there trying to better the village and trying to introduce new agricultural techniques that could actually be very profitable for the village, but he can't get them, one, to listen to him. I mean, he doesn't know how to teach them or how to communicate with them, and that's why he takes an interest to Mac. So Mac and Gilbert start to work together to try to teach agricultural techniques to this village. But the problem they run into is that the village chieftain is not a fan of this at all. In fact, the village chieftain plays the major antagonist role in this story. So the setup here is an extraordinarily, again, complex and more realistic look at colonial and post-colonial early independence Botswana than one might think, because sometimes the Europeans get painted all in the bad light, and then the Africans are kind of this one-sided, like, trying to get liberation. But there's a whole host of, complexities where there's a lot of internal struggles as well. Of course, not justifying colonization in any sense. It's just recognizing the reality of the situation. And a book is always, I think, going to be 100 times better if it works with those realities and recognizes them. So that being said, what is the journey of Mac? Like, what's the I've given you kind of the setup of the story, but what are some of the themes that emerge? It's not a long book, by the way. It's what is it? 184 pages in medium-sized print. So the writing is not like terribly dense. However, it does ask profound questions. Mac's principal purpose, what he says and tells Dinaragua that he wants. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that even remotely right, by the way. Um, he wants peace. Mac is looking for peace. He's tired of the political fight in apartheid South Africa. He's I don't know if we want to say disenchanted, but has given up really trying to change his society, and that's why he fled. And now what he wants is just to find peace within himself. He wants a wife, a family. So the rest of the book is going to play out in this village with him helping Gilbert trying to organize these new agricultural techniques and introduce tobacco farming, an export crop that could make these people money instead of just subsistence farming, which is of course going to have some cultural changes. Now, oftentimes we romanticize village life in any part of the world, or small town, small village, small community life, but there's a phrase, at least in, I remember from my time in Peru, Pueblo Chico infierno grande, small town, big hell, is the idea. And this is something that you can find all over the world. Not always. Sometimes small communities have their good sides, of course, but they can also become very, very oppressive places to live when power is amassed, even on a small scale. So that's definitely going on in this book. And so Mac wants peace. He wants just he wants to find peace within himself, but he realizes that all these complexities that he dealt with in apartheid South Africa, are still present in this rural Botswana village of Golema, Mmidi, and he still has to struggle with that throughout the whole novel. And about, I think, a third to halfway through the book, we become acquainted with two very important characters. Matenge is the village chieftain who kind of plays that antagonist role, but Paulina is a woman that has also kind of had a refugee experience and come to this village. So we get a sense of this village as sort of a place that takes in refugees. It's made up of refugees, essentially. And so we have Paulina, and she has a great conversation with Ma Millipede. I was going to say centipede. Ma Millipede is that's much better. Why do we, at least in my world, have such a better conception of millipedes than centipedes? Like, centipedes are really but millipedes are like, okay, I don't know. It's just random tangent there, I guess. So Ma Millipede is she and Dinaragua are kind of like the village grandfather and grandmother in a sense, and they're the ones that people go to for wisdom. Our main character Mac has a great conversation with Ma Millipede, great conversations with Dinaragua in the book, and they both note his growth and his difficulties in finding this peace within himself, and struggling with. There's some really powerful moments in the book where Mac is really struggling with his internal hatred for the colonizers, the whites, even though he becomes really good buddies with Gilbert, this Englishman, and Gilbert himself left England because he was just sick of the superficial regimented culture there, and has this whole part of the book where Gilbert himself is talking about how how much he dislikes the sort of culture in England, and that's why he left, and he wanted to like do something with his life and be active. So it's a very much like this relatable idea of like, why does somebody from what appeal does a developing country have for somebody in a very developed and secure situation to leave that situation and go and, join the Peace Corps, or go to another country and try to do some kind of humanitarian project. Gilbert is kind of that. He sort of embodies that idea. And so he's, in my mind, mostly a character that I like. He's got some flaws, but that's why he's real. He's a good character. They're all really good characters, all flawed, all really did come alive, even in these short pages. So it was a really good book. I'm just kind of like, I'm debating whether I want to get into spoilers or not, as I'm ruminating on what this made me think of it. I've already kind of talked about some of the themes, but a lot of this book, it's really interesting because, so this is one way I can do it without completely spoiling the plot or just listing off what happens in the plot. The book kind of starts crescendoing towards these conflicts between, like, the village chief, the antagonist village chieftain Matenge, and there's this other political figure that gets involved that are like, they don't want change in the village. They don't want any of Gilbert's new cash crop stuff that's going to empower the people that they are ruling over. And so it's very apparent that the motives of the village chieftain and even his brother, who's a little bit more charming, but is still essentially a feudal lord over this village, living in a mansion while most people there are struggling just to get by. And they have these ideals of, like, no one owns any property, you can't mark off property and stuff like that. So it's almost kind of this communistic tribal village mentality to have going on, but is really just a disguised oppression by a small chieftain, right? A small-time chieftain. So yeah, that seems to all be building up to something, into a conflict with Mac and Gilbert trying to do their agricultural stuff. And then there's like a romantic, not triangle, but square between Mac and Marie and Gilbert and Paulina. Or it's really more of like a U, if we're being realistic. And Mac, but it never comes to, like, blows. It never really explodes. It's just kind of this brief romantic triangle that seems to be building to something. And then there's this political struggle in the village that seems to be leading to something. But then the second half of the book takes a very strange turn into it's almost like real life. Like, you think it's all building up to something, like a storybook type of thing, but then life just kind of takes its own turn, and you're dealing with, like, Paulina's son who's ill and she had to send him out to the pastures to work with the cattle, and now he's falling ill, and she's just trying to figure out, okay, what can I do to make ends meet? And Mac is considering, like, marrying her. He thinks he loves her. So it's kind of like life just takes its own turn. And then at the end, it does all come back to, it does tie everything together back with this antagonist village chieftain, Matenge, and Gilbert, and the whole, what they're trying to do in the village with the agricultural thing. Just not in the way I expected. It's not a grand finale. It's almost the ending is is very melancholic, anticlimactic, but kind of real. And, like, it's not what I'm used to in experiencing in literary construction. Like, you expect sometimes in books and even in literary classic fiction that all these things are going to build up to a big climax and finale. But this book kind of does away with that structure and is almost just a chronicle of life. And don't get me wrong, the ending ties up the loose ends. It's just the way it does it is very thoughtful, anticlimactic, meditative even. It's like it's almost like Mac and the author Bessie Head uh, were writing this towards some sort of big climax and big finale, but then realized that's not the point. The point here isn't to find out who's the bad guys, who's the good guys, and for the good guys to win. It turns into a meditation on the whole subject of, you know, racism, racial hegemony that is so integrated in this region that you can't run away from the topic in writing literature about it. It's like you wish you could, as a reader, you wish you could read this and say it doesn't matter black, white, and as a person, it doesn't have to influence you. But in this book, in this reality, you can't run away from that. And that's not the only thing. There's also, you know, but at the heart of this is Mac's struggle for peace, for happiness, for just a life that he can call his own. And he even refers to this village in Botswana as a prison, which is kind of fascinating. I wonder if I can actually find that part, because yeah, here it is. Micaiah found his own kind of transformation in this enchanting world. It wasn't a new freedom that he silently worked towards, but a putting together of the scattered fragments of his life into a coherent and disciplined whole. Partly life in the bush was like this. In order to make life endurable, you had to quiet down everything inside you, and what you had in the end was a prison, and you called this your life. It was almost too easy for Micaiah to slip into this new life. For one thing, he wanted it, and for another, he had started on this road 2 years previously in a South African prison, the end aim in mind being a disciplined life. But the Botswana prison was so beautiful that Micaiah was inclined to make a religion out of everything he found in Golema, Mmidi. And that, to me, really kind of captures just sort of the mentality of this. That's so there's no conception here of freedom, of as the Western values, right, of freedom being so important, individual freedom, it's like that is just not even part of this reality. It is choosing your prison is sort of the realities that Max seems to be faced with. And this sounds grim, but yet within this idea of choosing a prison is finding a kind of spirituality within that. So it took me a long time to kind of get to that point, but yeah, it's another quote I really liked here, and this again, much like Amadou Hampate Ba's Fortunes of Wangren, the story ends with a funeral, and I'm not going to tell you whose funeral, but I will, leaving out a few sentences, I wanted to do that, include this. So, the rest of the dazed and stunned villagers slowly began to make their way homeward, still unable to utter a word. You have to be loved a bit by the time you die. People can only say good things about the dead, and if you've left no treasures on this earth, what's there to hold on to except a terrible pity? And again, all this sounds really grim, but great lessons in this book of, when you strip away all of the sort of things in life that we think are like so necessary and inherent parts of life. It's like when you strip them down into a village where existence is like subsistence living. And this is, of course, the time period that this is being written in. It's saying nothing about, modern day Botswana or this area. Simply this book, what it's showing in this time period, you know, and you start to think about what's really important in life when you have so few possessions is, what did you leave behind, in fact, immaterially? It's like people will remember, how you made them feel, and you want, you'd like, not for its own sake, but simply for yourself and your own existence um, to help others and to, oh, I'm losing it. to You want them to be able to say good things about you when you die, right? That's almost more valuable than what you leave behind materially, I guess, is what I was trying to get to. So yeah, I'll stop there. This was a tough book, again, to wrestle with, because I went into this video really not having a concrete idea of what I was going to say or how I was going to say it, because it's like, yeah, I read it, and it's like sometimes talking it out is the best way to figure out what you thought about it and what you felt about it. It's not produced, it's not, I'm tripping over my own words half this video, but I still think that's valuable and consistent with the way I've been doing this project. So appreciate you sticking around if you have made it to the end of this video, and each one is different, so I hope you'll join me for the next video on Mike Reads the World. I announced all the books that I'm currently reading at the end of my last video, so check that out if you are interested to know kind of what I'm working on right now. Thanks again, have a great day, and we'll see you next time on Mike Reads the World.